We do have our city council member, Carlos Flores.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Leonard Firestone. And Mr. Blaylock.
I'm here. My camera is, I don't know what's going on with the camera. I mean, technically it's on, but.
Well, we know you're there then. We can hear your voice, so appreciate that, sir. All right, we are going to go through a simple format. We're going to go through some topics of concern that are kind of universal. The first topic of concern, which is homeless and panhandling.
Homelessness is an issue that affects all areas of the city. Let me say that again. One way, different scopes, it affects us all. City Council is well aware of it, but what are we doing about it? We have a multi-pronged approach. The police can't just simply take care of the problem by arresting people or displacing them from a place where they tend to congregate. That's not effective, right? And that's really putting a big onus on police to try to take care of a very complex problem. The different, types of homelessness. People are affected, by substance abuse, might have mental issues. That's where our, mental health unit that the police department has integrated comes into play. You just don't know exactly what you're dealing with on any given call, all right? Outwardly, people say, well, it's a homeless person or homeless people, take care of it. The way I proceed about doing it is also multi-pronged. I call, our NPO, call the police, and also call permanent supportive services, okay? Because they need to be at that front end. It's possible that this person or persons might need assistance, okay? Many of us are not that far away from, hitting on, tough economic times. And we just never know what people are facing. So in that case, you have to get code compliance involved. If there's cleanup in an alleyway or an area, an empty lot, that's part of it. Code compliance, permanent supportive services, and police, okay? And then we also have agency partners, right? Texas Coalition for Homelessness that come in to help us. One very effective tool that we've employed has been housing, specifically permanent supportive housing, all right? One model that we have used, and in fact it debuted in District 2, has been to incorporate the funding, not just coming from a sole revenue source, but also philanthropic groups, church groups, as well as your traditional groups. So all come in, they contribute and raise enough money to buy, a property and then build, the facilities, right? And it's not monolithic. It's not what you might typically envision as being, your typical homeless housing, right? It doesn't look like cheaply built apartments. And in fact, we're trying to incorporate it so that the design is very pleasing. In this case, I don't know how many of you have heard of New Leaf, all right? That's what I'm referring to as being the first at the cutting edge of permanent supportive housing. And again, it came into being in District 2 off Quail Trail, which borders the River Oaks community, right? How do we proceed? We've got the philanthropic community behind us to help us, raise money. They purchased the property, but before doing so, they also sent out, representatives into the community to talk to them, to say, this is what we're thinking about. This is what it's going to look like. And they look like individual homes. They're 44 homes. And if you look at it from an aerial view, it's kind of like in a pinwheel configuration. And they just look like, smaller cottage type homes. And it's been very well received. I myself took it upon me to go talk to the city leadership over at River Oaks, tell them what we were thinking of doing. And again, they were very positive in their approach, offered their assistance. And now we have, each one of those units occupied. What does that mean? You're talking at least 44 people off the street. Well, where are we in terms of numbers? In terms of numbers, the homeless number, we have these annual counts that we do to give us a better assessment of where we are. At last count, we were at approximately 218. That number varies, right? It's not a static number. It's going to change. It's going to rise. It's going to fall. The economy being as it is right now puts a lot of challenges on us. So it's not surprising to hear that people are reporting more homelessness. Okay? And tied in with that, you might equate it to panhandling. Well, we have a specific panhandling ordinance that really specifies do not give money to the panhandle, right? We're trying to be very equitable in how we approach that. Police have been tasked to go ahead and encourage, panhandlers to go away. But beyond that, we have to remind residents that, again, we have an ordinance that prohibits people from giving, money to the panhandlers. Otherwise, they'll be encouraged to come back, right? And that brings with it, other things that, folks don't want in their communities, okay? So the homeless problem is approached that way in a multi-pronged fashion. Now, specific to police, we have the Hope Unit. That unit is tasked specifically with dealing with homeless issues, and that's been done to some great success. Currently, it's only 5 police officers that comprise the Hope Unit. In this proposed FY23 budget, we're thinking of increasing that number by additional 6. We need, more, support in that regard. The police are supportive of that. We want them to be successful in what they do to help us, address homelessness.
I think Councilman Flora has covered it really well. I'll say, within District 4 in the north, we have spent a significant amount of effort, both with code enforcement and with the police department to enhance one, citing panhandling, and 2, removing it from the area. And I think if you've driven through it recently, you'll see the results of some of that efforts. Not mentioned, I think, is the effort that we've made to remove, bandit recycling bins and other things throughout the area that have kind of acted as magnets for these folk. So we continue to put a great deal of effort in cleaning up, this issue and making it better for the city.
Yeah, I might chime in here with a couple important points, I think, and an example, just how important the city believes this issue is. And so some of you may be aware that there was an old rundown hotel, which we've renamed Casa Esperanza, which was converted to house chronically homeless people. And I believe we are now housing 150, 175 folks in that building very, very successfully. It gets them off the street, gets them a landing spot to get their life in order, and hopefully out looking for employment and getting things together. So because that was so successful, we've looked for other opportunities. And if you followed our meetings in the last few months, in fact, I think you would see that we have committed several $1 million to, I think Carlos, maybe remind me, either purchasing a building or building on property. I think we may have done one of each using ARPA money. To confirm that, again, understanding the council and mayor understands what the issue is, the problem is, and certainly very cognizant with a large city as we've now become at 1 million people, growing rapidly. We've got to get in front of this as best we can. So we're committed to it. We've identified dollars, we've identified locations, and we, I think, have created a policy and a system within the city to address this issue. And again, that example of Casa Esperanza, I think, is a really, really bright type of example in terms of its success. That we can be really proud of.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any of our officers that'd like to add any information?
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Stewart for Edward District, which is the district that's Golden Triangle all the way down to the freeway. So the majority, where the majority of the panhandling's been occurring. So we just got done a 4-week detail where we went out there, tried to identify people that are constantly committing the panhandling offenses, give them citations, and we've been logging everything. We just started our second phase of that, and I hope you guys have started to see a little bit of progress of just trying to get the people that are continually out there breaking the law and trying to get them cited for their violations. And the other people, including everybody there, we're trying to get them in touch with the resources that can help them out to have different alternatives. So just to give you a little idea of what we've been doing the last couple of months. So, any questions about that? Yes.
Did it go into like a job, like programs helping build a job?
I don't have specifics. You guys may know more on the resources that are available, but we even go as far as we'll give them rides to where the resource centers are throughout the city. We would much rather spend a little extra time and get somebody on the right path, get them in a better situation than to just write endless tickets. So that's not our only approach, is just put people in jail and do things like that. We're actually out there taking everybody's individual circumstances into account and trying to get the best solution. We've seen a huge increase. I would say COVID happened and everybody we didn't want to engage in face-to-face contact with a lot of people. So it kind of let a problem get out of hand. So now we're trying to get a little control of that. We did a 1-month deal with North and Northwest. So we both kind of are integrated in District 4, District 7. So we did a detail together. They would do 1 week, we'd do 1 week, and we would cover a larger area. It was very successful. We heard a lot of good results from just the citizens that are around, kind of the people that monitor everything and let us know. They said they've seen a big improvement. We're going to go ahead and try to do it again. So we started it again today. We're going to do another 4 weeks, see how that goes. We're doing a lot. We looked at all the problems, the things that worked, things that didn't work, and we're trying to improve every time we go on. So the big thing we notice is keeping track of who we come in contact with and communicating with the other divisions so that, the people that are, if we go around the corner, they just turn around and go back out there. That's obviously an issue that we need to deal differently than with somebody that we've never seen before out there and they're down on their luck. They just figured a way to get $1, and we could probably support them with other resources to help them out. So
So the repeat offenders, the ones that are
Mhm.
belligerent and
Yes.
continue to do it, is there anything that you've learned that surprised you?
I don't think so. I think I don't even know how to really answer that.
I guess, was there anything that we can take as a community to go, why do they keep doing it? Is it just the money, or is it some other?
If everybody's handing them a $20 bill out a window, they're gonna be coming back. I mean, I think the incentive is money.
So maybe
Ultimately.
there are PSA announcements to the rest of us? Like
Yeah.
commercials?
I believe the city's done a good job trying to get that out to people, and we have to try to let people know, don't aggravate the situation. But not everybody gets the message. There's a new person every day. Every person that's out there has a unique set of circumstances. So we can't put everybody in one group and say, let's treat everybody like this or do everything like that. So we're working towards it though, and we're more than welcome to have a conversation and hear more suggestions. Anything you guys unique that you guys have had problems with, I'm willing to listen to. So
I'll start in by saying this. We are consciously not wanting to concentrate, permanent supportive housing in any one place, right? For example, you can't just offload it on the East Lancaster corridor and call it, a day. It has to be distributed so that, again, going back to my point, homelessness is affecting many sectors across the city. So you have to have that kind of, prong as part of your total solution. So we look at, again, the private sector looks at properties and says, well, I'm interested in developing a permanent supportive housing, development somewhere. They'll look at what available properties there are, what's surrounding. I mean, from zoning standpoints, there's certain zoning criteria you have to observe. And then they'll talk to the council member and say, what do you think? Then the process is very much like you would find in a zoning case. You go out, you engage the community stakeholders, talk to them, and see if it's a good fit, for the area and the surrounding uses around that center.
Okay, the next item we're going to be covering are short-term rentals. We just need to hear what your positions are on short-term rentals and possibly what some of the discussions have been, and maybe explaining some of the options that you're looking at.
It's a very complicated issue, and I'll try not to be very long-winded, but I will say that, the council members are engaged on this. Certainly, Leonard Firestone and Alan Blaylock and myself have, had our own discussions about it. There are subject matter experts that we have relied on to kind of give us additional insights beyond staff reports as to what the nature of that, that matter is. STRs in different cities have had their own impacts. We're aware, we've looked at what other cities have done, and quite frankly, other cities are looking at what Fort Worth will do. At a recent, meeting, we were told that our ordinance is really not that bad in the sense that it could use some improvement. It's been suggested maybe in the areas of enforcement. One clarification that I want to make is that on any given Tuesday, the folks that are supportive of short-term rentals will tell us, Fort Worth's ordinance has to change, it has to evolve, it has to allow for short-term rentals. Well, that's not exactly accurate. Our current ordinance does permit short-term rentals, but only in areas that are zoned mixed use and some commercial areas. So we do allow them. Now, we don't collect hot tax on them. That's something we can certainly look at. But let me be very clear. It's been suggested early on in our discussions by the folks supportive of STRs that the city could collect hot tax once it allows short-term rentals to come into residentially zoned areas, and then use that to pay for enforcement, for added enforcement that we would need. Well, you can't do that. State law precludes you from doing that. You can only use it for purposes of tourism. So, that was kind of a misleading statement, off the bat, but, it's been, we've been very careful, about the information that we collect, the information that's messaged. And how many of you, just a show of hands, have looked at the information that was put on the city website, that gave the different options for STRs? Okay, a good few of you. If you haven't, it's still up there. Take a look at it because there's a lot of great information there that gets into specific details. And again, let me be clear. The city council has not made a decision on it. Okay? It hasn't been put on a specific date, for us to take a vote on. Eventually we will, but we're still collecting information. We're still meeting with people on both sides of the issue. Okay? But speaking for myself, the way I approach things is this. I don't take sides, I take a position. And that position is determined based on facts, right? I look at what is being proposed and try to run the traps to see what the consequences are, both short-term and long-term, right? Because from a zoning standpoint, say, very simply, zoning is there to create, an orderly development of the city. And that includes our neighborhoods, right? We buy our houses for what purpose? So we can live there, so we can reside there, raise a family there if we so choose, right? Live life, quality of life issue. We're not there just to simply use that as a business enterprise. So I understand that. Now, one might say, well, what's the difference between a short-term rental and a traditional rental? Well, the amount of time that's rented out. Right now, state law says that a traditional rental, should be for 30 days, minimum. What short-term rental users are doing is they're renting them on a much more accelerated cycle, right? Maybe 2, 3, maybe in some cases 4 times during a given month, right? And that puts some stresses and, other influences on a neighborhood. When you're talking about public safety, some would say, well, there's no public safety impact. I've heard from different people, including PD, that it does have an effect on the sense of safety, in your area. And in some cases, one that occurred, not too long ago in Chisholm Ridge, it could result, in some criminal activity. One never knows. Different individuals run them. You have investors that are coming in very strong into some cities and buying up a lot of available housing product and supply, right? Fort Worth would be no different. Just to kind of put it in terms of the comparative scale. Over in Dallas is also looking to change their ordinance. They have over 6,000, SGRs. Here in Fort Worth, probably closer to 1,700 right now. Anyone want to take a guess where they're really proliferating? Stockyards area. Why? Well, it's an entertainment district. It makes sense that they would want to do that. But there is an older neighborhood there, the north side. They're going to be squeezed by that. Okay? And then eventually, when the Panther Island project comes into its own, it's going to be another side of which that neighborhood area is going to be affected. But you don't necessarily have to be in an entertainment district to be affected by STRs. So what the city staff has done, we've hired a third party that's doing a lot of data mining. We're looking at where they exist and trying to get a sense of that. And we're already getting some information. And again, on certain council meetings, we hear from, different individuals, again, on both sides of the issue, and we take that. For me, I don't want to be premature and communicate, position, right now, but suffice it to say, I have some very serious and deep concerns about allowing STRs in a residential area. And, I'll defer time now for my council members because I know they've been very much involved too with this matter.
Working through it, I think Councilman Flores gave a lot of good information there. I'll say for me, I won't do anything that harms our neighborhoods. I've heard all of you loud and clear, and I've experienced this firsthand as vice president of Heritage HOA for years. So when it comes to short-term rentals, I won't do anything that harms neighborhoods, and just kind of leave that at that. I'm open to hearing ideas and possibilities on how SROs may be possible in some areas, but again, the bottom line for me is neighborhoods got to be protected.
I think I'm, in a way, very similar to Carlos in terms of the attention that we are giving this issue, given the district where, in terms of the entertainment district that is in District 7 around Dickies, certainly around the cultural district as well. And we're aware that there are a lot of SDRs in those neighborhoods illegally, but they exist, and we're going to have to deal with that. So, I think what's important to know is we are at this point being thoughtful and thorough. We did hire that third party, as Carlos mentioned, that gave us some feedback. They did a bunch of research for the city during July, and we've now are beginning to digest that. I think the thing that I fear most are the unanticipated consequences that STRs can bring to a city in general. In the research that we've been doing, we've seen examples. Carlos mentioned Dallas. Austin is another good example. Fredericksburg is another good example, where the city leaders are really regretting more of the more liberal policies that they allowed for at the beginning of the STR movement some years ago. And I think what we're seeing is an industry that has become very sophisticated, very organized, and well financed, that is quite different than the industry of 10 or 15 years ago, where it was maybe an owner of a household that wanted to rent their garage apartment for a little bit of extra income. More innocent in nature, I describe it as. And that has changed. And STRs have become the aggregation of housing inventory, which is pretty dramatic. And in aggregating the inventory, what we're seeing is financial players coming into the market, so to speak, literally the city, but then the market that this has created simply for financial gains and financial returns for investors. And to me, that's problematic because I do certainly follow the same concern or ideology in a way of Alan, that we cannot do this to our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods were not created to become financial instruments for investor returns. And, so I take that very, very seriously. I take the fact that in District 7, out at Lake Worth, as I mentioned, in and around Dickies and Arlington Heights, there has been real problems that have created issues for residents, for their safety, for control of their neighborhoods with unknown cars parked along the streets, the party houses, the trash that accumulates over the weekend. These things are problematic. It's not what any of us, I believe, invested in our neighborhoods. And so we shouldn't be the ones that are paying the taxes, committing the time to our associations to improve our neighborhoods, to care for our families, to make it as communal as possible, and have a threat disrupt that. So, just the last point I would make is in Austin, we have heard as an example, in Fredericksburg, I mentioned as well, they are trying to retroactively change those original policies. It's gone to court. It's gone to the Texas Supreme Court. They've said in Austin they cannot change the original licenses that they granted, and so those folks are grandfathered in. But there's 17,000 STRs in Austin. And, just further, because I've gotten fairly passionate about this topic, it's having the consequences that I mentioned earlier on a micro neighborhood level, but on a macro level, what these cities are seeing is inflated housing prices. It's challenging for people to actually purchase homes. And in fact, there are a couple instances and examples in Austin where schools have had to close because families have moved out of those neighborhoods. There are not enough children to fill the seats in those schools, and they've closed. This is not a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing for a city, certainly not a good thing for our neighbors and neighborhoods. So, I think, as I said, we're being thorough and thoughtful. We're obtaining all this information, digesting it, and seeing where there may be opportunities to modify our policies. That's to be determined. But we are looking at this very seriously, and certainly don't want to be casual in our determination, because our neighborhoods are not meant for bed and breakfasts, owner occupied or otherwise. And it's those unintended consequences that we're trying to root out from these other areas, other cities, to determine the best way forward.
Thank you, Mr. Firestone. And I do appreciate the approach where you're learning from the experience in other communities. I've been in the real estate industry. I'm a realtor, worked in the industry for 27 years so far. I've never seen any communities where short-term rentals have enhanced neighborhoods, have enhanced cities, especially when they get overwhelmingly populated. And because we all work, we move into our neighborhoods to either be a homeowner or a long-term home renter. You know, we value our renters here, even in an HOA. You know, we value their good renters because they're neighbors and they're here for the long term and they put in time just like we do to make this a great area. And it's really not, a lot of us, I'm not speaking for myself, but I get a lot of input because I am on the HOA board too, so we hear from a lot of residents that don't want this because we're all working very hard together to make this area as desirable as it is, which is why investors seem to like it. But if we get too many investors in here, it's going to lose how special our neighborhoods are. All of our neighborhoods are going to be impacted. So we appreciate everything you're doing to keep an open mind, but however, know what is possible. So if you make any allowances, good. But as long as they're not overreaching and overly generous. I will say one thing, for those of us in HOAs, Chisholm Ridge, for example, we not only have a cap on how many homes can be rented here, as for even long-term, but we have a total ban on short-term rentals. Because when we had that incident that Councilman Flores was referring to, within about a month, we got with our HOA attorney and we just, he looked up the law, he looks across the state, see how the HOAs have done it, and we have a complete ban. And fortunately, those neighborhoods that are not covered by an HOA, they don't have that benefit. So they're really counting on our council members to keep tabs on everything there. Because we're concerned about safety, both at home and on our streets, and all these topics. Traffic impacts, both passenger and commercial, and our parking.
Just one quick comment to what you just made with regard to HOAs and being able to enforce this themselves. That so depends on an HOA's existing bylaws and DCE&R. It's great that your HOA was able to accomplish that, but some of the HOAs in District 4 to do what you did would require an 80% majority vote. They require a super majority to accomplish the same thing. And then those same HOAs, depending on their bylaws and DCE&R, have challenges enforcing. Some HOAs have the ability to fine, and others only have remedy through law, which means that for each instance, leasing this would literally require the HOA to go through full process and ultimately file lawsuits. It's incredibly heavyweight and burdensome, and many HOAs throughout the city just simply can't do it. So I think it's great for Chisholm Ridge, but that's not really a viable protection across the board.
Yeah, it's something that each HOA is going to have to look into individually. And we know that even our own enforcement here is going to be dependent on the city's enforcement, because it's very hard for us, for our HOA enforcement people, to know what's a short-term rental. But once the city starts utilizing that service on a regular basis, hopefully they do, where they identify where inappropriate short-term rentals are and it becomes public record, because that's the hope, it becomes a public record. Once they're being, enforcement's happening, the city's taking them to possibly to court, or a violation's been written, then we can be aware of it and we can provide our own enforcement, and which can serve as a deterrent, because all it takes is the first one. Our fine's $500 a day for violations. So that hopefully will be something that, a lot of short-term rental operators may not be aware of every nuance in the CC&Rs. They may be reading, they be a lot more careful. But yeah, it's really tough, but it's going to be worthwhile if those neighborhoods can do it. But we are concerned about our neighborhoods that don't have that kind of organization, that structure under an HOA. So I know the council is going to be focused on that as well.
One question real quick on short-term rentals.
Quick question? Yeah.
Does that include like those people who are renting out like their pools and stuff?
Some of the testimony that we've heard at council meetings, to your point about pools, right? There are some STRs that operate that do have pools, right? Even accessory structures that are used as STRs, well, the pool is part of the property, but it's an amenity of the property that the accessory structure where the STR is operated at gets, those renters get to use that pool.
Okay, so the next one, yeah, just so you know, Chisholm Ridge, we decided to do this here because we're kind of a hub. We are, just a stone's throw away from District 7, across the 35, we got District 4, so we have what impacts us a lot of times will impact other districts as well. So we're going to bring out the next one. It will be the proposed soccer stadium and additional proposed developments, which is east of 35, north of Basswood.
Everyone's aware a zoning case went through for the property at Basswood a few weeks ago. Many neighborhoods in the area were involved in discussions with the developer and developers representative about that project. The zoning case was approved. Was approved unanimously. There was no dissent. Now, all that said, there's currently no soccer stadium being discussed for that location. And that's kind of the bottom line. The idea of a major league, minor league soccer team has not been progressing for some time. And barring, someone coming, to the table with significant funding, I don't see it moving forward. And the other council members can express their views on that. That said, 75 acres of the property is currently under discussion with the city of Fort Worth for acquisition by the Parks Department. There's another 50 acres that are in a floodplain that the developer is looking to grant to the city. And then there's also another 12.4 acres of park dedication that the developer has to give based on the single family and townhomes that they are planning to build, which gives us roughly 140 acres of parkland that's going to exist at that location. There are currently underway studies within the park department and others for best uses for that property, and the discussion is around sports fields. So that may mean that we see soccer fields there. It may mean that we see baseball fields, softball fields, tennis courts, pickleball courts. Who knows? But that study is ongoing and it'll be finished. What they said in the next 90 days. These things typically take longer than they do. But anything that occurs from that perspective and those studies will get public presentation. Anything that PARD ultimately decides to build there will have public review. So there's going to be lots of opportunity for input.
So as chair of the Sports Authority, I can comment a little bit on, the evolution, call it, of this idea of the soccer field. So originally, as Alan said, it looks like the soccer stadium is not going to happen. But what the city was contemplating several years ago, before this idea actually emerged for the professional soccer and the large stadium, was identifying, or it was identified, that the city was really lacking an asset of, call it a long field asset: soccer, lacrosse, football, baseball, and otherwise. And specifically, the thought was we need an asset like that for sports tourism. And that was the original idea. What can we build for sports tourism? If folks in the audience and listening are anything like me, I have 4 children, and we are driving them all over DFW, as I did to Lewis, over to Dallas last weekend for soccer tournaments. And so the city needs this kind of asset for tourism purposes. So when we decided that was something to investigate, The city engaged a consultant. They did a study. They identified 4 different locations where a complex of some kind might fit and would be useful for this purpose. And the Basswood property was one of them. That evolved into the stadium and professional soccer idea. So we are now going to relook and dust off that study, relook at those other sites, think about other potential sites to build this kind of facility for sports tourism that will be multi-purpose. I think it's an exciting idea. I think it's an exciting asset that the city should have for that reason. But we decided, and I think what unfolded was to build what was going to be required for a professional soccer team. We were going to, as a city, have to backstop and essentially finance that construction and operation of well over $150 million. And I think nobody was really comfortable doing that. An ISD had to participate. They, I think, lost some interest. So, it got very complicated from a financing standpoint. So, where we are today, again, is to relook at that idea of what we can build for sports tourism, where that will be, and then how can we finance that through a public-private partnership.
And Alan and Leonard had mentioned, I'm open to the idea of having, a soccer facility somewhere in Fort Worth that can serve, the needs and desires really of our population without having, a negative impact on infrastructure, because what we were talking about at the time was a 10,000 seat stadium, for USL, men and women's soccer. And that was in partnership with USL and FC Barcelona. All right. That all isn't very exciting. All right. I played soccer, before, love the sport, but there's much more to it. As a council, it was important to us to have a youth component, built into that. It just can't be the city building a stadium, for the purposes of someone else's benefit. We have to realize the benefit. These are public dollars. I think, us three here see the benefit, the potential with it, right? But we have to be very careful, in how we proceed. As Leonard said, ultimately the Basswood location seemed to have the most merit. We were getting a discount per acre, as part of that initial conversation. Me personally, I thought that there could have been something additional brought to that negotiation table. That's where I stood. I said as much in one council meeting before. Nextel and their ownership have indicated that they don't have, those resources to bring more to the table. Financing to contribute anything else, and that may be. So if not an equity investment, and I discussed this with my fellow council members, perhaps some kind of revenue sharing, to offset the city's investment, in that facility. As Leonard alluded to, we try to make some good, conservative projections as far as our financials. We're very careful stewards for the public dollars. We don't want the city to be left holding, that debt, right? It's important to us not to get in that position. You can make projections about how, the TIF is going to perform, and that's well and fine. Is it possible that it doesn't perform and then we have to cover that debt? Absolutely it is. But I think the possibility still exists where we can, look at it. What that's going to look like, I can't tell you. But, my takeaway from all this is the door is not closed, right? We're thinking about it. In this case right now, it's as Councilmember Blaylock referred to, it's not imminent. And it was, while it may have been in many people's minds related, to that zoning case, it was not a necessary component to it. The options still exist to do, something soccer related or something else entirely.
All right, so we are looking at a proliferation of warehouses that are popping up. As a matter of fact, in the last few days, the North City project, where we expected to see some retail, office space, restaurants and such, and possibly an entertainment venue, we've seen walls come up on yet another warehouse, and some of us were caught off guard because we're getting our alerts and announcements, but we didn't realize we were going to get a warehouse right next to us. And part of the proposed development to east of 35 north of Basswood is also inclusive of more warehouse and transportation hubs for consumer goods and whatnot. So what can we expect? Are we going to see a lot more warehouses coming up to the Alliance corridor, or where are we at? Because we like living here, but we don't want to also be surrounded by commercial vehicles.
Why are we seeing maybe an uptick in the proposed developments, involving many warehouses? Well, I can tie it in with this, and maybe I think a lot of people can relate. Call it a post-COVID effect. Suddenly a big interest in RVs. A lot of people are buying them, looking at them, right? Being remote, having that ability to, live and operate outside your house on your own terms. Well, where are they going to be stored? HOAs have their rules, as far as, where they can be kept. There's a great demand, using many warehouses so that you can, garage and, store and keep things of that nature, right? Over in the Marine Creek Ranch area, there was a recent proposal that off Huffines Boulevard and 20. There was a undeveloped piece of land there. The residents were very sensitive about what would go in there. There was a proposal for, a mini warehouse development. So it's all things, I talked to the developers initially. I don't make any commitments. I just say, your next task is to go forth, talk to these stakeholders, and then report back to me and see where they're at, right? If there's room to talk, great. If there isn't, we'll have to consider, something else, or you just pulling out, right? Just abandoning the idea. Well, they talked and they, surprisingly came to an agreement, amongst themselves, to allow them many warehouses. The only caveat with that involved traffic. They wanted an additional dedicated turn lane, which I found reasonable. But generally, there is a demand for this type of development, right? We have zoning categories where it's allowed by right, where it doesn't require a zoning change. But then you have situations like Urbana, I think last year in 2021, and then more recently in August, the aforementioned case, that I mentioned, the Marine Creek Ranch area. Have I seen an increase of that? Yeah, probably similar to the increase in multifamily. Right, the margins are there. The reality is, and I've talked to several in the real estate, realm and developers. Retail is, the margins are, again, not guaranteed. I know a lot of people will tell me, well, I really do want neighborhood retail, or when this area was first developed, there was the anticipation of having, some desirable neighborhood centric retail in that area. The economics have changed, right? And some people will say, well, instead of this commercial use, why don't you have retail? It's less of a traffic impact, for instance. Not necessarily true. The numbers indicate otherwise. But what I'm saying is this, from a developer standpoint, it's much harder to get smaller neighborhood-centric retail, put in place and to be sustainable to the point where it can thrive. It usually has to be part of a bigger development to have any kind of chance in being successful.
I would mention a couple things. So as these cases come up, as Carlos mentioned, you have to first look at what the acreage is zoned for and what by right might be available. Number one, but as we look at any rezoning cases, at least I feel like I go through a couple steps. One is talk to staff, see how the idea fits with the comprehensive plan and how we're looking at growing out and building out areas of the city. Alliance Corridor, of course, being a pretty popular one. And, look at the best use in terms of density. And, is it a good fit? Is it, I've had several cases where warehouses simply have not made sense because they back up to a neighborhood. And we told the developer that. And they said, well, what could we put there? My response often, particularly up north, has been, how about a grocery store? We've just got so many, there are food deserts up in that area that I think, I'd really like to see that addressed. There's been a case where developer wanted to put a 55 plus multifamily building in, really just about a half a mile from another 55 plus kind of assisted living type product. And we denied that, believing that it was just additional density, certainly not good for a warehouse, obviously. But, my point is that we're trying to balance the need for housing, the need for commercial development, including warehousing, where we think it fits well, particularly in how it works with the comprehensive plan and where we need to go as a city. It's certainly not a rubber stamp by me or any of, I think, the council members in total, and certainly Alan and Carlos included, that we were, try to be very, very thoughtful and sensitive. And just I would add, and I know the guys do the same thing, when we get a developer in the office showing us that project, typically or oftentimes a warehouse, we will say, have you talked to the neighbors? Have you talked to the HOA about this? And that's for warehouses or commercial development in a different way, certainly multifamily, any product. Have you talked to the neighbors? Because I know my position has been, by and large, if the neighbors in the surrounding area are not going to support this project, I'm not going to support it.
Okay, next topic we're going to cover is the North City development. This kind of goes along with this because it seems like, is this part of what we were discussing? Because we did have the idea, the initial presentation was about, like I said, residential, commercial, some retail, some restaurants. And now it looks like this plan has changed. So any comments from anybody?
Well, as far as the change to the plan, I know that there was, when it came to road infrastructure, right? That was something that required, a detour, I guess, to use the word. As you know, Tony, when it first started out, there was a desire by the property owner to develop, a sizable chunk of acreage, in this area. It wasn't lost on me that the development of that size and scale would have very pronounced detrimental effects, when it came to road infrastructure, right? You have a certain capacity with current roads. We look at that, a level of service with the existing roads. I look at these things when the data is available and try to make at least an assumption of how much additional capacity can be done, and I rely on our transportation and public works staff to quantify that, to see if the area can, comfortably absorb, that additional use. Right? So when it came to North City, I was very clear, I told them at the time that unless it had some additional work for added road infrastructure, I would not be in support of. Okay, and specifically, it dealt with that connection, to Harmon Road. And, I know Jack likes to refer to it as a dead man's curve, right? But, it's a very, it's not much of a curve, right? It's almost like a 90-degree.
Well, it used to be, and they did extend Horseman up to Crested Butte, so, but now that's gonna be, it did change, so now it's gonna be connecting straight into North City.
Correct.
So it's gonna be real fun for fire trucks when they're coming
Yeah.
down from, the other side of 287 someday. They have to cut through
Yeah.
North City every
They
time.
were,
But there were technical challenges there that they could not overcome. They tried, but even our traffic engineering department determined that, it would be pretty much, almost impossible, for them to do it,
Are you talking connecting Horseman to Harmon?
that direct connection. So, the alternate connection, was made. And, that's when I, notified you all of what was going on there. Daniel Smith was involved,
Right.
in those discussions. The end result was we did offer an alternate connection there, which was important, right? To again, prevent traffic from going into, the neighborhoods, to cut through, right? You get a lot of complaints about cut through traffic. So if you have a nearby development like that, you don't want to cause that kind of problem. Hence, you got to have an alternate roadway to be able to accomplish that. And so, in sum, that's what I can, share right now.
What we've noticed in the last couple of weeks that Tony mentioned is it's not parking warehouses. This is a sizable commercial distribution center that got put in this area that's on the left side of 287. I mean, there's these 50 bays for trucks to come in and out of that facility right now. You can see it's under construction right now. You can tell it's going to be a commercial loading area for, some sort of distribution site. The problem is that the developer, when this was first proposed, had in that area a multi-use facility for, business type activities such as a business building, a multi-use facility of some sorts in that area. But nowhere did it have a commercial warehouse of that magnitude put in this area. So fast forward to now, through COVID, through everything else, I'm sure business models have changed for what he feels is more profitable than having a fully developed business facility, because most people are working from home now, so they couldn't probably fill, the capacity of some sort of, corporate office environment there. I understand that. The problem is the infrastructure that you just mentioned isn't being addressed either. That whole section of 287 coming south through there, if you've been on those roads there, what they did is they put in a turnabout there to get either off to Harmon or down on the access road to, the rest of 287. I just don't know how we're going to address something of that magnitude with the trucking, that's going to be coming in and out of that area.
The roundabouts were, I think, how many years ago was it, Tony, where we had a meeting over at the school, and, there were city staff involved with it there, but in part, it was also, collaborative effort with Tech Staff.
Right.
As well, to put those in place. Now, if the developer made a change like that, okay, and if it wasn't zoned for it, there would have to be a new zoning case to come before council, to change that. That has not occurred. So what that tells me then is they've made a change within what the zoning category permits. The phrase by right.
Right, and you're 100% right, because that was a discussion that we had. They wanted to do light industrial in there, and that constitutes certain things that, he said that, well, I don't think I want to be putting that in there, but, it's zoned for that, just like you mentioned. So, things change, he goes ahead and does that. I think that's what everyone is kind of referring to, because that was not expected, 2+ years ago, obviously, when this was first initiated, and now we're seeing it with what's being done now. So I'm just concerned that the traffic now to get off on that exit of 287 at Harmon is bad enough without having a commercial element smack right dab in the, the turnoffs right there for all the trucks.
Let me take, I hate
hate to do this, take this away from. Oh, I'm Rusty Fuller. I'm president of the North Fort Worth Alliance. Councilman Flores and the North Fort Worth Alliance made a big effort about 5 years ago, to get 287 fixed. 287 doesn't work. Because the growth happened out there before we knew it, okay? So, I'm gonna talk about phase one of that project, because phase one of that project is what they call a four-corner, or I call a four-corner solution. Harmon Road will come down to a traffic light. There'll be a bridge from across 287, similar to the way it runs now. Harmon Road and Bailey Boswell will take off of that road. Harmon will come down and make the Dead Man's Curve, and Bailey Boswell will come through between those small little residential for rent places that are being built and this industrial warehouse area. The industrial warehouse was under discussion with the West Fork Ranch HOA for a number of months, and I can't remember back when, but we did keep Chisholm Ridge aware of it. That person may not have understood, depending on who was on your board at the time, may not have understood the impact. But the industrial people are building, as part of their requirement, are building Bailey Boswell through that area down to where West Fork Ranch is. And then the intent is for them also, at city expense, build the rest of Bailey Boswell over to Horseman, okay? The city has in the 2022 bond proposal the design of Bailey Boswell from Horseman over to Harmon. So some of that traffic will be, some of the large truck traffic will come through there. Part of what I call the 4-point solution is North Tarrant Parkway will no longer go into, there'll be an intersection that'll allow people to come from the North Tarrant Parkway across 287 in a separate bridge, get on and be able to get onto Bailey Boswell and come through. Or they can go through the intersection and go to the other intersection, which is Harmon. So hopefully that will take care of the traffic flow in that area. But that I do want to stress that industrial warehouses, I didn't realize when we were all discussing it, that it was being that far north. But in fact, I went back and looked at the documents, and it is. So, but the traffic will not be coming down the traffic will not be coming down Harmon, it will be coming down Bailey Boswell.
Thank you, Rusty. No, that's good insight. I think what Mr. Sheridan was talking about, he was talking off mic, was the fact that, because he was on our board at the time this was initially proposed and presented to the Chisholm Ridge and neighborhoods, Ridgeview Farms and such. And eventually we saw that there was a request for light industrial, but it was the placement of a potential warehouse pretty much right on the service road, much closer to the service road, as opposed to close to Chisholm Ridge. So that's been the big shock. It's like, how can this happen? We didn't know about this, but now now we're looking at by right, but we didn't realize that section was going to be light industrial, but I guess it all was. So yeah, we just need to pay a little bit more attention.
So I'll just make a quick comment. I mean, I moved up into North Fort Worth, 18 years ago. And I think the one constant through that entire time is roads not adequate for the traffic. And I think from the day I was here, I lived right off of North Tarrant Parkway. It was 2-lane asphalt at the time. And, we've seen that there's a real need for consideration of traffic impacts for any development that occurs. I got in my 75 days on council, I got a crash course on this topic. You know, the very first item was one we already talked about a little bit, which was the soccer stadium. When we start talking about 10,000 seat stadium, you know, just north of Basswood off of Riverside, you know, there's significant traffic concerns there. So it's something that we've all been looking at, you know, as we move forward, you know, some of the tools that council has to address these things. One that we'll be discussing soon is TIFs, or transportation impact fees, and how to better manage those to start being able to build out our road infrastructure to support the growth that we're seeing, and have the growth drive, you know, actually paying for those roads, you know, much sooner than later.
Alan's spot on in looking at the transportation impact fees. And then, of course, I think I want to mention the bond that was, sorry, my dog, sorry, everyone. The bond proposals that passed, some of which are going to address by infrastructure specific construction of roads in the area. So that's going to be forthcoming.
The last one we're going to cover right now as an open topic here is the increase in Fort Worth PD staffing. So we would certainly appreciate that happening. Is the fire department also going to receive an increase? What's our status with public safety?
Short answer is yes. The fire department is going to get an increase.
That's great news.
23 positions, and that does include facilities here in Station 45. And keep in mind, we're in the middle of budget talks, right? Always keep in mind the qualifying word proposed. You know, we have a matrix study that we refer to. It gave us some guidance on how to address police-related needs. That study was done prior to COVID, so it's dated. So when we look at that study, what it recommended, we're trying to update that with the current set of needs, right? You know, we do this not just on council, but also as a Crime Control and Prevention District Board of Directors. Okay. Good news is that we are adding needed, you know, positions in police. You know, that includes also sworn officers and civilian positions, and also in fire. Okay. We're beginning to get into those, you know, particulars on those discussions, but so far it's been well received, you know, on the council. You know, other council members may have additional input. You know, as for me, something to look at going forward, you know, we have, you know, these cadet classes, these Leo classes that come in. We're trying to, you know, if you were to look at a plot of what our needs are, you know, the number of, you know, cadets who are graduating to become police officers versus the attrition rate, in recent history, we're a little behind because there were a lot of retirements, you know, from the police department. These things we have to make up for. Is it possible in the next budget cycle that we would have to consider an additional cadet class? It is entirely, right? It's not set in stone. We are, you know, taking steps, you know, to address that. We've heard loud and clear, you know, from our residents, and I know Alan and Leonard can attest to this, that, you know, public safety is a big concern. You know, along with that, again, let me expound on this, you know, being good stewards of your dollars. We've lowered, you know, the property tax rate, okay, which is what council can do. Is it enough? I wish it were more, right? Your tax bills, my tax bill, are still going on. The reason you really don't see that much of an impact, even though there is an effect to your tax bill, the reality is we only touch a third of your total tax bill, right? The rest of it deals with, you know, what the ISD, you know, needs are, and also back to the property tax, you know, valuations, or I should say property valuations, right? They're going up. Not sure what you know, the real estate market's going to do. You know, it's been superheated for a long time. So that 2/3 is really driving, you know, those increases. But for the past 8 years, the city council, and ever since I've been on the council, have voted to lower your property tax rate. We're doing that again. And think about this, right out of COVID, we are probably the only major US city that can do that and still have capacity, for capital projects and other needs, that our residents have told us are important to them. That's a testament, to how the council has managed things and, quite frankly, the direction that our city manager, has given us too.
I think his number was actually a little high for the city of Fort Worth. We just got an informational graphic, outlining the property tax proportions for the various entities. The city actually is decreasing to about 27% of the total property tax bill based on the new rates that are being proposed. As Carlos said, I would and I advocated for and ran on a larger reduction than that. But it's still, the bigger challenges are still the ISDs, and we are just one factor in that total bill. I would like to have seen more in the way of police officers, but I think that the number of officers being proposed is great. Chief Neil Noakes at the budget workshop that was just done at Summer Glen Library indicated that would be 6 new officers here in the north in the evenings, which is a tremendous increase for us over what we currently get. For those of you that are in the know, our nighttime coverage is quite low. So I'm looking forward to a lot of things in the budget. As Carlos indicated, we're going to see an increase in fire as well. Those presentations are coming to the council this week, and so we'll have more detailed information to share on that very soon. But I really do like what's happening with regard to the police department. I really do like what I'm hearing about fire. I really do like what I'm hearing from code in this budget, and I think that'll be really good for us, especially up here in the north.
Yeah, I was going to mention that the 6 officers up north, we did hear that from the chief last week, so I'm excited about that. If folks aren't aware, I want to mention that Station 45 at Quail Grove and Harmon will be opening next month. That's great news, of course. And, there is complete understanding that we need to address response times. And we're tracking that very carefully, statistically, and trying to address that any inadequacy there to improve the response times. And so I think, again, the city is very clear on providing services in a timely manner, important services to ensure safety, to ensure again those response times for any kind of emergency. And I'm proud that this budget, we have recognized it and we're addressing it.
Thank you. And I know part of that is including some of the expenditures on Flock's. Now, this isn't like brought to you by Flock Safety, but the Flock Safety camera system's been proven effective. We have it at Chisholm Ridge. We've gotten to the point where the month of July we had no reported crimes whatsoever. Now, not to say that our police department didn't respond to alerts that might have come up through the system that alerts the PD, when we have a stolen vehicle coming in, for example, or a registered sex offender where they're not supposed to be, like here. So they respond automatically. They've done so at 4 o'clock in the morning when we're all sleeping peacefully. But I was real proud to see our July report from our NPO just indicating that there was no reported crimes. And that was a first in years. So I'm really pleased to see that we have that experience, and as well as the city utilizing them throughout the city in mobile installations.
Sure. So to add to that, Tony, when it comes to code compliance, this proposed budget does offer, increased funds, to deliver, on things that a resident would expect, on a monthly basis, right? Moving solid waste fund into the environmental fund. Now, keep in mind, there will be an increase in that. That increase hasn't been seen in years. And in fact, there was a decrease in that rate in 2013. So for the city to have maintained that over several years is a testament unto itself. But our population has grown. There comes a point in time where you hit critical mass and you have to add, resources in order to meet the demand. But I'll share with you something that I posted on my council page, which is a slide which kind of quantifies for you, well, if this budget is approved, what do I, the resident, expect to see on a monthly basis? Okay, I'll just notate some things. We were talking about homeless camps earlier, okay? In the prior budget, we could get and take care of and abate about 34 homeless camps per month. Under this new budget, we will have the capacity to deal with 110. Okay? And that puts it, in perspective. When it comes to, bulk waste pickup, we'll be able to do more, right? And trash pickups and all that would also, increase. It's important to note that part of our budget approach is to maintain, a clean and safe community, because that is directly related to public safety. An area that is unkept, but what impression does that give? Says they don't care. They're vulnerable. They'll allow anything. So that transmits the wrong message, right? When it comes to maintaining a safe neighborhood. So it's important for us to be able to keep that update, to a level that residents expect. We did a respondent survey back in 2021, and it was very clear that residents told us the city needs to do more as far as keeping our streets and public areas cleaner. Well, we need to add, to our available resources in order to do that. For years, the city has operated only 2 street sweepers. Now imagine a city, 13th largest of this size, 2 street sweepers. These recent rains, to put it in perspective, I had a call in for them to do a few blocks worth, some neighborhood areas, because with everything being so dry, that first, series of showers caused a lot of dirt runoff, etc., and, debris going into the storm drains. Well, we deployed the street sweeper. That street sweeper was over there just for 4 blocks for 4 hours, just going over them in the cross streets too. The ADA ramps, were also, had debris that needed to be cleaned. That's 1 street sweeper. 2, for a city this size, no way that can work long term, right? So we're adding street sweepers there. We're adding staff to help us, with cleanup. And you will see measurable results. The whole point of me saying this and putting it, this is the reason why we present it on a monthly basis, because, you get a monthly bill, a water bill, right? And in that water bill, you will see, charges, right? For, solid waste, for environmental funds, etc., right? It's so wonderful to look at, but at least it gives you an indication where your tax dollars are being applied, right? What you can expect in terms of performance to public services.
I just think it's important. I might add, thank you, Tony. I hope people understand, and Carlos said it well, but the major takeaway thematically of this budget, the council, I think, is keenly aware of quality of life issues, and it's safe, clean, a safe, clean city, and a city that is constantly addressing infrastructure needs for quality of life purposes. And we're all living in all these areas and encountering the same issues. And I give our mayor great credit for really recognizing the importance of these themes and investments. You know, I think we're prepared. The city and city staff is prepared to deliver on it.
I think both Carlos and Leonard were very eloquent on the topic. I want to give a couple of numbers that really illustrate Carlos's street sweeping. The projections are that they'll be able to cover 6,300 lane miles every month out of the 8,100 lane miles in the city.
That's good to know, because I think with the 2 vehicles we have right now, they could be running 24/7 and still not cover the city in a year.
Right. And the thing to realize, because the math looks really weird, while they're going from 2 to 12 street sweeping machines, they're hiring multiple shifts to move those machines. So they'll actually be in service multiple shifts a day.
We know that the Alliance area, we've known for a long time, is exploding in terms of development, commercial, and all of that. We know we contribute a lot of taxes in terms to the city. And yet there is a little bit of a general feeling out here from talking to a lot of people that we sort of have spent some of the last years maybe lagging behind in what should have been done in terms of infrastructure. And wondering, you know, just like Fire Station 45, which we're really happy is going in, it's going to open up. If it opens next month, it's going to open up with some obstacles because the road's not being ready over in that area. That probably should have been done. The planning should have been done, you know, in a perfect world where it was ready about a year ago, so the roads would be ready so it could have those fast response times. And I think what we're wondering, of course, the city is projecting by 2025, that's going to be, if I remember correctly, the Fort Worth projects that'll be the highest density of jobs in the DFW Metroplex, even eclipsing the airport. And we're wondering if the priority placed on this area, since we felt a little like stepchildren in the past, is we're wondering if what you guys plan to do to help us in terms of priority a little bit, so our infrastructure catches up to what we feel like we deserve based on what our area is contributing to the city's budget.
That's a very good question, Jack. Let me say this. I want folks to understand that we on council are not merely just providing wordplay to these needs. I mean, we are making very measurable steps to trying to take care of infrastructure. The recent, bond program, 2022 bond program. When the first bond proposal came out, what happened? We started having these public meetings. And in one of my public meetings in District 2, we heard very loud and clear, from folks to saying, well, what about this? What about this road? What about this thoroughfare? So it became very clear, and I'm glad that the city manager was present because he heard it direct. And I kind of quipped to him. I said, you see, it's not me exaggerating. This is real. We've been hearing it, and it's building, and it's becoming more of an issue as more people move into the area. So what did? We took a step back. We added $60 million just based on that public input to that bond program. The majority of which was to address those infrastructure needs. Not a single bond program or a handful of them will close that gap overnight. It's going to take some time. To your point, in the past, I think for whatever reasons, city leaders then maybe didn't recognize or adequately, address, the infrastructure needs when, there was an opportunity to do so. Before I became a council member back in, it was 2008, then Mayor Moncrief put me on the Blue Ribbon Task Force for Transportation and Infrastructure. And our recommendation to the council then was, you need to spend X amount of dollars on your infrastructure now, because if you don't, it won't be a linear projection. it's going to get vastly worse. And if they were to have taken 100% of our recommendations, it would have only addressed 60% of the infrastructure needs. I mean, we're recognized city budgets are limited, right? So we're the beneficiaries, of things like that. But, to offer some context, back in 2008, it was around the time there was a big economic downturn. So you really can't say the council just didn't do it and ignored it. They had other, issues upon them that they had to consider as well, especially when the economy started, bottoming out. So again, we're recipients, of these needs. We're trying to address them. Are we making progress? Yes. In this budget, in fact, have, aside from the allocated dollars that we have for, defined projects or infrastructure projects in a given area, we have something called PAYGO. All right. It's, an additional funding source to take care of things like sidewalk gaps, maybe getting, a neighborhood connector built. It's not a lot of dollars, but recognizing that we were relying more so, on that fund, the city manager decided to allocate more from our tax revenue into that fund. And so now that brings it up to a little over $65 million, I think maybe 65.4. And that's a, significant increase over past, PAYGO funds. And that'll help supplement what we've already allocated dollars for. So that's an indication that we're listening, to, the North's need for new infrastructure, right? And that's not going to get solved overnight. But again, we are, doing more than just merely paying attention to the problem. We are, allocating and setting aside dollars so we can deal, with the problem. I can tell you this, that when Leonard Firestone got on council, he and I, had a lot of conversations where we had a lot of similar needs in our area, right? All three of us have territory in the north, and some of these areas intersect. So they're very similar needs, and we recognize that, and we try to advocate as much as possible, for those needs. And I think if I could point to something here that all of us, we're involved with, would be that. We heard loud and clear from you at the last, proposed bond program, and we made sure that the city took appropriate steps to have those additional dollars so we can start addressing more of those infrastructure needs to get where we need to be sooner.
For brevity's sake, I'll say ditto to what Carlos said, but I'll also add that both Councilman Firestone and myself have just been added as alternates to the RTC, the Regional Transportation Commission, where we'll both be in a position to help advocate for more funds to help with this problem in the future, as well as what we're working with in terms of PAYGO and other dollars.
I think it's worth mentioning that to solve the problems that we all know very well, the city can't do it all by itself. And, so there are other stakeholders and entities that need to be involved to address infrastructure issues. You've got the county, you've got the state, you've got RTC, as Alan just mentioned, you've got the Council of Governments involved. Roads are complicated from builders and what we're going to ask them to do that specifically impact developments in the areas that they're impacting, to issues that are complicated between land that has been annexed by the city, land that has not been annexed by the city. So we encounter situations where the city might be able to build a road up until a certain point, and then it becomes county. And, it kind of hits a dead stop unless the county gets involved. So it is complicated. I would remind everyone that just last fall, Tarrant County had a bond package that passed, and there's several $100 million that passed. And I believe there are of that, I think it was about 500 million 150 million is going to the north side of District 7. And out of, I think, the 12 projects that infrastructure projects that they identified, 6 or 7 are going specifically to projects in the north side of District 7, which I lobbied very hard for, and I was excited to see that kind of commitment by the county and awareness of the need to address these issues. So again, it's just the attention and awareness is there, and it's real by the stakeholders, and it's a matter of time. I also would note, and this came from the RTC meeting, as well as some of our recent city meetings in addressing available federal funds. So we are being very aggressive as a city and a county in going after available federal funds and trying to get ahead of the curve to qualify and file for those funds to specifically address these issues. So I would just tell you that the awareness is acute by decision makers and leadership across the board. And, we're working hard at delivering it.
Jeffrey Sheridan, just wanted to say thank you for putting this on tonight, Tony, and all the council members. Joy, it's really been a pleasure hearing from you today. And I'll be brief here. We live in District 7. About a year ago, I was working with Sammy Roop from your office, Mr. Firestone. Just want to say it's been a pleasure.
Right there.
Oh, is she? Oh, okay. Just want to say it's been a really good relationship working with your office there. You're very responsive to questions pertaining to city items, so just want to give you a compliment on that. Specifically, about a year ago, I was put in touch with a gentleman by the name of Fred Maldonado. He was from AT&T's commercial division. There's an ongoing issue with telecommunications in this area, especially north of 287 and Blue Mound. If you've ever been in this area, all the major carriers have a real challenge in providing great cellular service. And at the time, Mr. Maldonado said that the challenge is not with the carrier per se, it's with the city providing the ability to install either antennas or the proposing of leased areas for antennas, because as of now, he mentioned there's only one cellular tower in this area servicing this entire community. So I was just hoping to kind of piggyback off of what Jack was saying. Is there any indication that we're going to kind of upgrade the cellular service in this North Fort Worth area?
One thing I can say is that for better or for worse with the North City development, I did plant that seed with Steve McKeever, the developer, because I made him realize how poor our reception is here, how slow our data speeds are, for example, our dropped calls and all, and it's getting worse because these towers are getting overwhelmed. So I told him, hey, you could possibly lease some of your rooftop for some of these antennas up and down, 287, 35. Just think about it. He's like, money. Okay, so there's an incentive.
I would just mention that it's a safety issue too, because if you go by Lizzie Curtis Elementary School, if you're sitting right outside their door and you're waiting for your child to come out of school, you can't make a phone call. And we all know what happened in Uvalde, okay? So it's an issue. It's not just quality of life, it's safety.
Agreed. I can add this much. Certainly getting a large cellular tower is more labor intensive as opposed to, say, a mini cellular tower. In prior conversations that we've had on council, and this involves, again, cooperation with the city, right? Making sure that the legalities are all understood, by all parties involved. If it's a utility that we're working with, say it's their utility pole and we're trying to put a mini cellular tower there, that's fine. That's another option. And I think that there's some room there to get some added connectivity using mini cellular towers. But, there are, some legal challenges there that have come up, not insurmountable, right? But that does offer at least a pathway forward, right? If not a large cellular tower, we can use mini cellular towers that we can, install on utility poles. If they belong to the city, great. If they belong to, say, Encore, for instance, well, you would have to get, permission from them. But part, just to give you an idea, part of the legal challenges are that, Encore, is, and I can understand, sensitive when it comes to liability that they assume if they permit us to do that. With our free Wi-Fi that we had, for, certain, underserved neighborhoods, for instance, we ran into that issue. Encore would not permit us to put in, those antennas. So what did we end up doing? We had to get creative. We, rearranged, the mapping locations of where we're going to have them, and then also worked with the Fort Worth ISD, to, install them there, on some of their properties.
Yeah, hi, my name is Cherie, and I live over in Park Glen. And I love the question about the AT&T. We do have small cells, and I just told Cleta, I feel lucky. But to your point, if you go over to the, any of the shopping malls or anything, and you're in the restaurant, you're dead in the water. There's nothing. And truth be told, I do work for AT&T, and I've constantly told them for about 20 years that we need better service out here. But my question is around, do we have any kind of like coordinator at the city with the county and the state when it comes to the roads? Like the North Tarrant, that whole construction seems to be taking a lot longer than necessary. Is that a county project? Is it a state project? Or is it a city project? And specifically at, what is the crossroad there? Riverside? It's like a major artery.
I'd have to check to see who is the authorizing entity on that particular project. But to answer your other question in regards to, is there a designated, point of contact at the city that presides over, all these, interagency projects? Not per se. Okay, that usually falls, by assignment to an assistant director of TPW. Okay. So if that a project like that comes along, the director, will assign it to one of the assistant directors, and then, below the assistant directors, you have, your project engineer, right? That is more, at the detail level as to, what needs to be worked out on that project.
Okay. And have we ever gotten any kind of reciprocity from the state when they're doing a project such as 35, and I'm not sure if that's federal dollars or if it's state dollars, for North Beach, let's just say, as it's eating up our roads? Do we ever get impact fees or could think about a revenue stream like paying Peter type of thing because they're wrecking our roads because they're trying to fix theirs? It's been what, 4 years? That they constantly go up and down, all the cars. And I don't really know if it's ever going to stop, because I don't think people are going to pay that toll.
Right. Historically, I can't say, but at least given this current legislature, no.
Let me just say about the North Riverside, North Tarrant Parkway intersection. That has been under construction for quite a while. You can go to the city website and look under Department of Public Works or DPW, and you can see the capital construction projects, and there's an update on that. All I can say is it's a big, huge project to do what they're doing. The utilities had to be moved. I mean, it took years just to get the road on the north side even started, to get utilities and rights of way and so forth and so on. The south side took forever to get built. The south side was in the 2014 budget and bond proposal, and took 7 years to get built. The project is supposed to be done in the spring, is what the last I heard. But you can take a look at the North Fort Worth Alliance Facebook page, and we'll get that information for you. Are really all around enforcement. And we want to make sure that people understand that code compliance needs to have the support to carry out the inordinately difficult process through which they must go to take on these short-term rentals. They've got to catch them. They've got to issue a warning. They've got to go back and catch them a second time, at which time they then can issue them a citation. And that takes manpower. That takes manpower on the weekends. And we have to have that in the budget. We have to have enough police officers up here so that when we have a low-level neighborhood disturbance call, they can take it. Right now, they can't. We have neighborhood policemen running patrol. And understand that the graphs show that we're supposed to, that they showed at one of your workshops that we're supposed to be fully staffed according to the study sometime in September of 2023. That does nothing for us up here. We have the largest land mass between your three districts. We have the largest land mass in the city and the fewest officers. Now, I know we don't have a lot of violent crime, and I understand the staffing and so forth that goes on with trying to take care of violent crime. But at the same time, we have people up near Texas Motor Speedway who claim they haven't seen a policeman. We have to have those police officers. It's not easy, we know that, because we have a quality police force. I don't know what people experience, but my experience with every single officer and a senior officer in this police department is they care. They are excellent police officers and they want to do their jobs. So we stand behind you when you make arguments for enforcement and for the betterment of the far north. Now we get advantages. We know that. We get advantages by gangland spendings where the kids have after-school things and help deter gangs, and that way the gangs don't come up here. We understand that. But what we want is the police force to be well taken care of, because they do a great job.
I'll just say I agree and support that. Everything Rusty said's correct. You know, we need the police. We need them up here. It's that simple.
I'll offer you this. Last week, there was a forum, right, between Fort Worth PD and LA PD. And it was an exchange of ideas and perspectives on how they were dealing with violent crime there and how we address it here in Fort Worth. All major cities have experienced an uptick in violent crime. Fort Worth is no different in that regard. But we are different in how we deal with it. And those differences were apparent, in that, forum, with the exchange of ideas, things that they have done to some success, things that they've tried that maybe didn't work out. Councilmember Blaylock was, present, as well. And, a couple of takeaways that I have, all right? They don't have a crime control and prevention district like we have. They don't have a means to keep, their police department resourced to the levels that they need. Okay? They wouldn't mind having it, is what, they told me. One of the stark differences is that they did not have the good working relationship with their elected officials at the city council level, like what we have here. And that's the price. Makes it much more difficult for them, to find help. They rely a lot on the private sector to get funding for anti-gang programs. And these programs are funded out of CCPD, right? So we have those available resources, and, we have a system of which, these organizations can apply. They're vetted. The council that also serves as the board of directors for the Crime Control and Prevention District evaluate it, right? And tomorrow we're going to have a meeting, and those that can tune in, to our work session, these are public meetings, would, I think, be very interested in some of the presentations that Chief Noakes and Assistant Chief Aldrich, will present. We're going to have, a look-see in how these programs touch zip codes, per participant levels. We're trying to find ways to accurately measure the impact of these community-based programs. And again, the community-based programs, are supposed to have, an anti-crime or a crime prevention element in there, and they differ, in size, they differ in scope and approach. No program is the same. They all come at, the issue of dealing with crime from different directions. But yeah, our police force, it is important to keep them not just staffed, adequately, not just to current, needs, but also to future, projected needs. It's also important to have the appropriate resources for them to draw on. And I'm not talking just about equipment. I'm talking about resources that also impact them. Mental health resources, because they're under a lot of stress. That's another, you can, there's a contribution there from COVID, right? It just, turned our world upside down. It didn't make it any easier for first responders or frontline workers, right? So we have to make sure that they have what they need to do their job.
First responders or police department, they're not immune to a lot of the issues that I think in any number of cities are encountering in terms of the tenor, particularly that can be put on police departments. So what does that mean? It can be, it's hard to be a police officer today. And so to Carlos's point, does create a lot of stress, number one. Number two, the industry of policing is not immune to the realities that a lot of industries are encountering at the moment, which it means that it's hard to get people. It's hard to recruit people to fill the positions that we are budgeting. It's just not automatic. And so, I think Chief Noakes has done a very good job in assessing the market and those realities, in taking steps to increase pay. For example, that we last year, when I came into office, there were significant problems with our 911 response times. And, part of that was due to staffing. So we've increased pay there to try to get the word more quickly, out more quickly to first responders and police. But so I think it's just, worth mentioning that reality as a dynamic in staffing and the pace at which that can be accomplished.
My name is Marla Homan. I live in Crawford Farms, and I want to thank everybody for coming. And one of the things that has been mentioned is we do need more police officers, and up here in the northern part, we continue to have issues with racing and loud cars. We go Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning, we woke up to the sound of wheels squealing, and we could tell that they were in that empty Albertsons parking lot. just going, making their wheelies and backfiring, and then they got on North Beach Street and started racing. And the same thing happened at 5:11 that same morning. They were still doing it. And so at that point, I called 911 and told them we need police officers to patrol up here because it's just very unbearable. And it's very unsafe. There's restaurants around there that are trying to do business, and here's all these cars just going around in circles and all. That Albertson's been closed for 7 years almost, and there's trash in there. You can see the circles any day. You can drive on that parking lot and see the circles. And a few months ago, we had a motorcycle just come up on our walking trail and go up and down the walking trail about 2 o'clock in the morning. And the neighbors said that they didn't call the police. We didn't call the police at that time because we knew we couldn't get anybody to help. So it is important, and I want to stress too that we do need more police up here.
Sales taxes are up. Sales tax revenues are up. What are you going to do with the money?
Well, that's to be determined, right? One area where you can see that, is in CCPD, because that special district takes, half cent, from those tax revenues and puts it into this special district. And we do have additional monies, again, unexpectedly, and it's good news for Fort Worth that despite the pandemic, we're seeing, higher projections, when it comes to sales tax revenue. So what are we going to do with it? I mentioned before, for instance, that the matrix study that was used to give council an idea of what it would need, what additions it would have to make to the police force to meet, the current, service level demands, for public safety in the city. Well, that's a dated study. Okay, we need to, revisit that study. Since that time, I can tell you the landscape has changed. Certainly the public safety landscape has changed. What that means is that maybe assumptions that were made prior, have been altered, right? We may need to look at, for example, maybe some, additional positions in other, categories that we haven't, right? I don't want to get too far ahead of this because we're supposed to get, some beginning to start getting some feedback, right? At our council meetings and our CCPD meetings. So it's entirely possible that some of that money, for instance, might get used for that. There is a proposal talked about and presented by Chief Noakes and also Leah King, the head of United Way, called, the 1 Second Collaborative, right? Which proposes another way of dealing specifically with, youth-related gun violence. Okay, because again, like with, violent crime, we're seeing, increases in that category. And that includes suicides, as well. So what do we do about it? The police have been very clear. We can't arrest our way out of it. Right? It's not feasible to do that. It's a totally ineffective approach. So they acknowledge that. Chief Noakes has spoken, to Leah King, and it's the collaborative approaches it this way. It gives it a wheelhouse for other, crime prevention organizations to help out, again, within the structure provided by United Way to address specifically, that type of violent crime. Okay? Because we see it, it's a concern, increases there. What do we do about it? Conceivably, and I'm not saying that this is where the dollars are going to go. For example, could, some of that money go to that? Possibly. Council has not made a decision on it, right? We're still discussing. So I don't want to get too far ahead. I'm just kind of giving you at least a couple of examples of what we could use that money for.
So with that, again, I appreciate all of you who are able to come in person. It matters a lot. And we want to make sure everybody hears this information, because the more we know about, the more we can take action, the more they need to hear from us. So make sure you, those of you who've been participating, get the word out about how productive this was. I think it was. So I thank everybody.
Thank you.